Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. During the international break, I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette. As ever, England have won a game, which I didn't watch, Rob. I'm just going to put it out there. International break is the time for rest and recuperation like Marcus Rashford is getting. And now, like Luke Shaw is getting after being sent off in 54 seconds.
Heartbroken when Luke Shaw got that red card. Absolutely heartbroken. Wasn't thinking at all, oh, now Luke gets a rest and that might help Man United. Oh. So it's like the anti-injury. When a player gets injured and you feel awful for the internationals, you go, oh no, we need that player back fit and healthy. You get a player suspended for the next game and you're a bit like, quietly, oh, I'm all right. But yes, I was quite happy with that. I think Luke Shaw getting some rest is essential. He's looking a little bit tired.
Yeah, I put Luke Shaw in that in the last show. We did a quick section on the players that you want to see have a rest, and I think I put Bruno Fernandes in there, but Luke Shaw would be included as well. So this is things are looking up for Man United. Not so much for Harry Maguire, who was on a winning team in Italy, but looked. I saw one highlight of Luke Shaw getting the red card, right? So I've just gone back before this podcast just to make sure I was up to speed with things. Harry Maguire was on the floor as Luke Shaw was making a tackle, and there was nobody around him, and I was a bit like, what are you doing, Harry? And obviously he brought the ball out from the back, passed it into midfield, gave it away, and Italy scored, which is poor Harry.
Yes. Well, when you win 2-1 in Naples, you're not going to get a lot of people on your back, are you? However, I think, again, we saw in that game Harry Maguire's deficiencies. And the problem is that when they're for England, I don't mind them, Scott. Get on with it. No problem. But when I see them at Old Trafford in front of me and you're like, you can't run, boy, that is a problem, isn't it? And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that happens month after month after month. So when he plays football, you see what's wrong with Harry Maguire now more than you see what's right. So, yes, he did spend a lot of the time on the floor because he's such a big guy. I think it's difficult to sometimes jump back on your feet when things are moving around you so fast. I think that's something that Erik ten Hag will need to address in the summer.
We may also talk about future Man United striker Harry Kane breaking the England goal scoring record at some point in today's show.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's future Man United player Harry Maguire. That's the line.
Harry Kane.
Harry Kane, is it? Harry Kane for future England player Harry Kane. It's the way it's going.
Yes, subscribe to this show wherever you get your pods, Apple, Google, Spotify, and the likes, and watch us on YouTube twice a week as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Leave a comment for us, like the video, subscribe, join the community, etc., etc. Plenty of comments, actually, on the last video of multiple things. Maybe we'll call some out later in the show. Not call them out. That's probably the wrong way to say it, but, address them. Or discuss your comments. And we'll see where we go. I think we got a bit of heat for people think we haven't watched Victor Osimhen before. So maybe we should talk about that. We'll also talk about the ownership. But I will, hands up, Rob will admit this to you as well. I'm bored as hell of the ownership. It's like a PR game. And
the Glazers game of Monopoly. And we're all on the chessboard, aren't we? We're all little pieces being moved around. So, it's boring. And like I say, people are reporting stuff that they think they know. And then 24 hours later, it turns out they don't know. It's egg on their faces. So, yes, it's almost better to just say, let's wait and see when your contacts are telling you exactly the same thing.
We'll talk about that briefly. We'll talk about Thomas Ziliakis. Which interesting offer, but we're not going to spend too much time on the ownership stuff just because it's been going on since November and it's going to keep going and you probably know which way it's going to end up in the end anyway. We'll also, I think the bulk of the show will be about Frenkie de Jong alternatives because there's a couple of tidbits of information that have come out over the last 24 hours or so from Argentina and from us at 90 Min. Potential alternatives. We'll discuss them. We'll also talk about a potential new young prospect to come into the United first team as well. Rob will tell you more. And like I say, we'll talk about the comments from the last show as well. You can follow us on Twitter @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseLandMU for the show as well. We're going to get our Twitter legacy verification things taken off us on it by April 1st. So get over there now, so you know we're real people before we are made not real people.
But we're no longer real.
We're forced to sign up to Twitter Blue, which I will not be doing. Anyway, let's talk about anything else you want to talk about on the England game, Rob, because Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, I suppose it's just good that Luke Shaw gets a rest. I don't know how many minutes Bruno Fernandes played for Portugal, but they won.
It's essential that none of our players get injured. That is it. That's the mandate. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. Just don't get injured. And I know it's a very selfish way of doing it. When I've talked to people years gone by about England, especially people who are much more passionate about the international game, and this is maybe the centering around World Cups and when you're at tournaments, I still feel like Manchester United is my priority. That's how I feel as a fan. So it's really, you almost feel a little bit fraudulent when you're celebrating an England win, but in one side you're going, don't get injured. So for me, Luke Shaw getting that yellow card, second yellow, was probably the best bit about beating Italy. Like, I know there'll be other fans that will go, that's terrible. But for me, I just want to see Luke Shaw playing at left back at his highest level after a little bit of a break. So when Marcus got injured the other day, I felt sorry for Marcus, but I was like, go on holiday, Marcus. Where's Marcus now? He's on holiday. So that's where he should be. So, yeah, nothing really more to discuss about it. I think with Maguire, again, we just saw things in his performance that were very Man United, and we don't want to see them. So, not a great advert for him, but I do think in the summer he will be leaving our football club.
Yes, we'll do plenty more of that in future shows. Let's just get the ownership stuff over with, Rob. I'm sure everyone has seen over the last 48 hours or so, if you're listening to this on Friday, falls into the 48 hours, the new bids have gone in. The revised bids have gone in. Oh, wait, no, they haven't. They haven't received anything. And on Thursday, then, I believe, Jim Ratcliffe's second revised bid went in. It's being suggested that Ratcliffe asked for more time, and therefore, as soon as the Qataris got wind of Ratcliffe asking for more time, they also then took more time. That bid is expected to go in on Friday. But it's kind of suggested out there that even these bids are not going to meet the Glazers' asking price. And the game is blatantly obvious now, I suppose, from the Glazers' perspective, Rob. We'll talk about the other bid in a second, but these are the two main ones. What's your take on it all at the moment, Rob? How is this looking?
Well, people have said to me repeatedly over the last few weeks and months, Rob, why have you not spoken more about the ownership issue, both on Twitter and on your podcast? And I've said, it's not a case of what's my opinion. I think my opinion is quite clear. I've made that clear about Qatar, my feelings about sports washing, my feelings about ownership and the Glazers, and etc. People still want to believe that I'm a Glazer supporter because. However, what do we think about the ownership? And this is what I've said, and I'm going to stick to this, is that when we look at our sourcing and we look at what people know, things can change, but don't rely on people just kind of putting out tweets and things like that. And that's what we're seeing in our industry, is that these things are going round in circles on 24-hour news carousel. The truth is, and this is, I think, where we stand, is that the Glazers would like to stay at the football club, buy out the rest of their family, the two brothers, we've said this on the show repeatedly, and refinance. That's their preferred position, Scott. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, because Qatar or Sir Jim Ratcliffe's going to have to come up with a bid that absolutely blows that out of the water. And we believe at the moment that won't happen. That's what we believe, because we've heard it from enough credible sources. So that's where I stand on it. It's kind of not a lot to talk about, is there, after that? Because you have to wait and see what the Glazers decide to do. No one is going to bid $8 billion for the football club. No one a year ago, 2 years ago, in a year's time, 5 years' time. People are not going to do it. So let's see what goes on, because I think the Glazers would prefer to stay as long as they could buy out the rest of their family. And if they've got someone like the Elliott Group behind them, then they'll be able to do that. They'll be able to stay in charge, and they'll be able to build a new stadium. United fans will hate that, and we'll discuss that when it happens. But unfortunately, I don't want to be kind of dour on the ownership side of it, but that looks the most likely option as we stand today. And really, the ball now is in Qatar and Sir Jim Ratcliffe's court.
What about Thomas Ziliakis and his bid? Which can you summarize this off the top of your head, or do you want me to do it? Because
You do
I'm
it.
gonna have to look it up then. It's along the lines of I'm going to come in with an X amount of money for, I think it was around $4 billion. Is that right? I'm going to come in with this amount of money to buy half of the club, and then I would like fan ownership to be a thing, and that would require fans to invest some money in order to take the bid over the line and also have a say in the runnings of the club via an app. I think it was Dreamland.
Twitter?
I mean,
Twitter
people have been asking for fan ownership for a long time, but to me, Rob, I don't think this was getting very far. It's an interesting concept, I suppose, but like in reality, that doesn't work.
No, it's a German concept going back over time. The old what we used to call the 51% model. So you'd have an owner that owned fans that would own 51% of the club. Therefore, the fans controlled the club, and then you'd have a billionaire with the other 49%. So that's the kind of premise of his offer for Manchester United, or what he would say was an offer. As I said to you off camera, just because someone says I want to buy the football club doesn't mean it's actually an offer, because that would mean that I'm also a bidder in the process, but I haven't got 8 billion quid. I think that fan ownership is something that could be explored in years ahead. However, we live in an acute capitalist society where profits drive everything, and billionaires are attracted to that, and so are football fans. So we're not going to see anything radical like that, not in the UK, because that kind of model doesn't really exist. You'd be ripping up the form book and doing something completely new. The Premier League would not endorse that. They would be like, fans with control of our football and our product and our sponsorships and our TV rights, they wouldn't like that. So yeah,
But I would like to vote for Man United to sign Mbappe.
Yeah, look, I'd like that. I was about to say, I'd stick 10 grand at that as a fan, go and find the money and say, yeah, can I have my 0.000000001% control? But no, can you imagine that, making decisions via an app? Like, Twitter's bad enough as it is about opinion, but can you imagine actually having an app that controlled who you signed? Oh no, look, 51% of fans don't like Marcus Rashford this week. Sell him.
I mean, if fans had got their way last year, he would have been sold.
He would have been. That's my point. So, like, that's it. Like, oh, fans don't like Harry Kane because he's too old and he's too English, and we don't like that. We don't want that. So, yeah, we'll sign Victor Osimhen because I watched Italian highlights last week and I'm really into Napoli now. So, like, all of that stuff you see is conjecture and it's funny, but it's also part of football. You kind of have to stand back a little bit and go, no, thank you. But I do think with the ownership, as I said, I've said it all along, I'm going to stick with it. I do think the Glazers are in control of this, and the Glazers do want the hype. You've seen again, Scott, share price has gone up again. Why is that? Because it's all chit chat in the press, all the stuff being put out through the normal lines. And that's what the Glazers want. They want their asset to be worth more money, because then they can go and bang on the door and say, yeah, if you want our football club, then this is what we expect from you. We do know that the talks between Sir Jim and Ineos and United were very positive, and that United, Bods, really liked what he had to say and how he would like to run the football club in terms of refinancing. But all the rubbish that a lot of fans talk about, Scott, in terms of debt is rubbish. Like, like if a billionaire takes on your debt and puts it on his billion pound company, then debt is no longer on you. Like, it's just normal practice. So there's a lot of that at the moment that, we just want the richest owners. But I just want an owner that looks after Man United, looks after Man United's interests, and is a kind of forefront, looks at Manchester United as the industry that it is, and protects that. Not someone that goes, oh, we want to put Man United as a kind of tick on our shoulder there and say part of all these companies that we own. I don't really want that. So there's pros and cons for it. So I think the Glazers, unfortunately, will be staying as it stands.
Plenty of developments to go yet.
There'll be loads,
but there's going to be this. It's like a roller coaster, isn't it? You get your hopes up, and then they go down, and then something develops, and then it's like, oh my god, something's going to happen.
And that's why these deadlines are fake. All this, like, oh, today's the deadline at 10 o'clock. Like, it's like, who does that? This is not X Factor. This is the highest end of billionaires.
They have deadlines
business.
in X Factor?
Of course you do. You have to ring up, don't you? And so, because like, you know, you
Right.
got
I
till
thought you were
six, you got
talking
till
about the contestants.
You got till 6 o'clock to vote for this band or this
I
singer
don't
or
watch X
whatever.
Factor.
No, neither do I. But I know how it works, Scott. So it's like Man United. It's like we all know how big business works. It does not work like imagine putting your bid in and go, oh, it's like I missed the fax machine, isn't it, for David De Gea? Like that's a real thing too. It's like, not in this scenario. You don't fax the bid over and you're a bit late, so therefore you can't buy the club. So I think they're waiting and seeing. They don't want to get played off against each other, and I think that's totally normal.
Yes, indeed. We'll see how it develops. Like we say, I think the Glazers are going to take another week or so to mull over the bids, whether there's another process on top of this or whether they make a decision quite soon. I think the Glazers would like to milk it for all it's worth, though. I think this is probably something we can be assured of.
And the politics within the Glazer family, I think, is actually the more interesting angle here. Like we all want new owners, of course, but I actually think there's a whole lot of stuff going on within the Glazer family about what certain factions want compared to the brothers. So the brothers kind of think they lead the family, but the truth is they don't. They don't actually have complete power within their family. So the vacuum is about what they want. And obviously, we know that most of the Glazer family would like to sell to make the money and go and have a nice life, whereas the Glazer brothers would like to still own Manchester United and be involved at the table of football because it is the biggest business in the world, isn't it, in terms of sport? So it is a wait and see. And the truth is that nobody knows anything because the Glazers keep their information quite close to their chest.
Yes, indeed. Let's we'll do the midfield conversation in a second. But Rob, do you want to talk about a potential new young gem from the academy who's been taking social media by storm?
Well, is he taking it by social media?
To be honest, when you sent it to me, it was the first I'd seen of it. But you know, he looks a bit like Phil Foden.
Shea Lacey, yes, 15 years old. So it's like when you mention a 15-year-old, it's a bit like, oh, here we go. But the truth is their journey to the first team starts earlier and earlier now. So I can remember years ago, Ryan Giggs being that age, like 15, 16. A lot of the stories going around Manchester about this young talent who'd played for City. His name was Ryan Wilson, and kind of getting him through the ranks and how quickly could he be in the first team. And of course, you know, by 17, he was valid already. I think when you look at Lacey and look at what's going on in his journey at Manchester United, there's the wild comparisons that people are saying the next Lionel Messi in world football, and you're like, wow, that's huge. But I actually think what you said there is more applicable. Is that he's very Phil Foden? You know, like you watch him and he just looks like Phil Foden, like his whole game. So an incredible young talent that Manchester United are developing. And I think this is why some Man United fans need to look beyond the ownership and beyond transfers and beyond all these things that kind of get people out of bed, you know, and get them excited when they flick the phone on every morning and looking for the next Mbappe bit of information that you're going to sign a huge star. Because I'm more interested in these kind of players. I look at them and I look at him and a Kobe Manu and Garnacho. I look at these young lads and I think this is how you build success through your youth. But great youth, Scott. Like, this is not just about picking any kids up. This is the ultra elite level from 15, 16, and 17. And before you know it, Scott, 2 years has gone. These boys are first teamers. They're in your squad. So it's not a very long time, is it? I think he's a great young prospect. We won't go too much into him today. People need to go on YouTube and go and have a look because there's plenty out there. But more than that, the people that do know and follow the youth team explicitly every week, look at this, know what they're talking about with this guy. And it reminds me a little bit, again, of the Wayne Rooney thing, of when he was like 15, 16, people were saying, this boy is already going to be a bona fide first teamer in the blink of an eye. I think Lacey's got that about him. He's dynamic, he's quick, he scores all sorts of goals, left, right, centre, does everything in the top half of the pitch. And he could well be Manchester United's Phil Foden.
Shea Lacey, everyone.
Remember the name. Remember where you heard it.
I was just going to say that. Remember the name. Shea Lacey.
I think we were one of the first people to talk about Garnacho in our earlier shows. We did a show on young players and we talked about this young lad called Garnacho before the Youth Cup. Do you remember? And people were like, who is he? Like, what does he do? And we're like, wait and see. Now, he had a great Youth Cup, didn't he? But here we are already, Scott. He's injured and we're missing him. And people are talking, Argentina are talking him up and saying, he's going to be one of our stars of the future. He's going to take over from Messi in the Argentina team. And you think, yeah, he is, because he's that good. But pick them up early. Look when they're 16, 17. And that's I think when you buy into their journey, it becomes a much more enjoyable experience as a football fan.
Yes, indeed. Shea Lacey, keep an eye out for him. Go and look at... He actually reminds me of Phil Foden. There was a clip of him scoring one goal.
It's frightening.
He has the same mannerisms, runs the same, dribbles the same.
Same herky-jerky style. Weird. Like he cuts in at weird angles, and his control is like immense. Like, I'm a bit obsessed with ball control. Like, I really am. Like, if players can't control a ball, I get annoyed. But his ball control at 15 is better than some of our first teamers. And you kind of go, wow, you can develop that. You could take that on to the next level at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. You have a world-class player on your hands already. So don't want to put too much pressure on him, but I'm sure he doesn't watch The Promised Land anyway.
You never know.
He might do.
Anyway. Yes, he doesn't watch The Promised Land. Anyway, let's talk about the meat of today's show, which is Frenkie. There's no real updates on Frenkie de Jong, apart from, I'm sure, what you've seen in the press, him saying, no, I love Barcelona, I'd like to stay. From what we understand, the situation's still the same. He would ideally like to stay at Barcelona. He's owed money by Barcelona. He's even owed more money by Barcelona with a loyalty bonus, which he's due at the end of the season, I believe. So, and Barcelona are in a position at the moment where they have to... Have you seen the payments of the referee stuff? That's happening. UEFA are investigating that, and also they have to, according to La Liga rules, they have to shed a significant chunk of their wage bill before they can go and bring anyone else in, and they would like to bring Messi back. So, as much as everybody would love to join Barcelona and love to stay at Barcelona, something has to give at some point.
Yes.
And whether that's Ferran Torres, it might be he's the first one. Rafinha, they could sell him. There's plenty of Prem clubs who would take him, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Frenkie de Jong is obviously an important part of the Barcelona team, but you saw after 14 weeks of chasing him last summer, it didn't happen. He's never made any bones about it publicly that he would like to stay at Barcelona. Doesn't mean he will, but we'll see. Anyway, United can't afford to spend another 14 weeks chasing Frenkie de Jong and not sign him again. So let's talk about alternatives. I'll start with one. We spoke about him on the show earlier this week, Rob. Alexis Mac Allister, you think is a good fit. And I have some comments from his father after the Barcelona game, or around the Argentina game against Panama. Some great video, by the way, of that game last night, with the fans getting to welcome the team home after winning the World Cup. Clubs are starting to call us for Alexis. This is his dad, by the way. Clubs are starting to call us for Alexis, but there are no firm negotiations now. We'll decide together with Brighton. They deserve respect. We'll pick the best project based on the coach. It's not about the money for Alexis. So I know you'd like to see him rock up at Man United, Rob. Encouraging?
Yeah. Encouraging, absolutely. And again, we know that there are inquiries for him. So that doesn't really surprise me what his father said publicly, because, again, it's always the first thing, isn't it, when a family member or an agent kind of speaks out and says, this is where we stand with things. Would I like him at Man United? Well, yes, but I also think that he's a list of names that you would like at Man United. I don't ever buy into this. There is one player that fits every size. It doesn't work like that. It's a little bit like the Harry Kane conversation for Man United. Is that, yeah, he's a good fit. He's not the only fit. There's plenty of players out there, and I always believe that. I always believe there's value in the market, and I always believe that you can go out there and find what you need in football terms. I think with MacAllister, a lot of it will be about his price. So let's say he plays really well to the end of the season, Scott. That kind of 50, 60 million pound bracket is no longer 50 or 60 million, is it? It goes up. Like, say he has an incredible end to the campaign. Say Brighton end up in Europe or something like that. MacAllister suddenly going to have a value pushing towards Enzo Fernandez, isn't it? It's going to be more like that. So that's not something I would buy into. I don't want him at that price. I don't think that price fits maybe the profile of the player. But I do think that we are going to be doing a lot of content in the weeks ahead now, Scott, of what we would call Frenkie de Jong alternatives, because as much as Frenkie de Jong might be the perfect fit for Man United, for Ten Hag, he's probably not going to come. And if he is going to come, it will be because Barcelona want to throw him off the bus, and Man United are going to catch him and go, come to Old Trafford, Frenkie, we'll save your career and save your life. But it doesn't look like that's the case at the moment. So why live in that reality? I think United need to look at midfield alternatives. We know that someone like Scott McTominay, potentially Donny van der Beek, these players are surplus to requirements. I think even someone like Fred might play less of a role next year, which means you're probably going to upgrade and buy a midfielder that helps you more in the kind of number 8 function. But you need someone that can play 6, 8, 10 and be competent at all of them, Scott. You can't just buy an 8. You can't just buy a 10. That's not modern football. You need players that can do different things in your team.
So obviously MacAllister there is going to come quite expensive, you would imagine, because he's moving from a Premier League club. If he does move, you saw in January that Brighton decided they didn't want to sell Caicedo, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And now he signed a new contract. It might be revisited at some point. Maybe even Caicedo is a name that might come on the United radar at some point soon, but I don't think that's the type of player that they really need urgently at the moment.
No.
Anyway, Marcel Sabitzer possibly can fall into that category. I know that there's no decision on his future at Bayern at the moment. I think United fans like him, would come cheap, although circumstances might have changed as Bayern have changed manager. Nagelsmann out, Thomas Tuchel in. They've just made the decision. As we record, this is not official, but it's pretty nailed on. So that might change plans for Marcel Sabitzer, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, look, I like Sabitzer, and I would take him tomorrow. And I think that if you could get him around the market value between 10 and 20 million, which is kind of what would be the value. Yeah, if you're looking at that, as long as like Bayern Munich were willing to do that deal, then I would absolutely take him, because I always think about fleshing out the squad, that you've got to have quality in those ranks of the kind of 10 to 20 million pound player. And this is kind of where I put Weghorst as well. It's like, he's not your ideal first pick, but you need players with a certain kind of attitude and dexterity in your squad to make sure you're robust. And I think Sabitzer fits that. So we've not seen a lot of Sabitzer. He's had a bit of an injury, and there was obviously suspensions in Europe and one thing or another that's held him back. But we've already seen enough, haven't we, of the type of player that he is. He's got a bit of combativeness about him, and he's good on the ball. And I think he's economical. That's what I like about him, is that I look at Fred, and I think Fred is the opposite. Fred is not economical. He's either the best number 8 in the world or the worst number 8 in the world. And that emotional roller coaster is not something I can go on every week, Scott. Like, the tears fall from my eyes. So you need players with consistency, and I think Sabitzer fits that more in terms of a profile. So yes, you're going to go and buy maybe what you call an elite number 8 or someone like that. You're looking for that kind of player, your De Jong alternative. But Sabitzer at 10 to 15 to 20 million makes sense. Do not be surprised if Thomas Tuchel rolls up at Bayern Munich and goes, no. Come home. I want you. You're my kind of player. Because I think Sabitzer fits the kind of style that Tuchel likes to play. And you'll see Bayern Munich will change their style. I think it shows, isn't it? Nagelsmann is one of the great young, talented coaches in the world. And yet Bayern Munich have kind of just taken the form guide and gone, no, we're not happy with this. So therefore we're changing. I
do think there's a bit more to it than that. I think
there is more to it.
Falling out with Neuer, like the goalkeeping coach that is, there's a lot of unrest.
But like you've got to look at it this way: is that the football's not a perfect circle. Like if Eric Ten Hag falls out with players and people at the football club next year, it shouldn't really matter if you're looking very long term. If you think that's the right guy, I don't think Nagelsmann is suddenly a bad coach because of what's been happening at Bayern Munich. So, but politics always do play a part of it, and this is why Bayern Munich are where they are. And all football clubs kind of do that, like we've seen at Chelsea. We saw with Tuchel at Chelsea, didn't we? And yet now they've gone and got Graham Potter from Brighton. Is Graham Potter better than Tuchel, who's now about to become Bayern Munich manager? Bad decisions by people who shouldn't be making those choices. So I think these coaches sometimes need a little bit longer, but I also understand that the politics does reign supreme.
Let us know if there's any number 8 type play, because basically United are planning at the moment on the premise that the Glazers will remain in charge, and that they have to, right? They have to plan for the summer on the premise that things stay as they are. If the situation with the ownership changes, they will change their plans. Mm-hmm. They want a striker, Harry Kane, Victor Osimhen. We'll talk about Harry Kane in a second as well. Harry Kane, Victor Osimhen, expected to be where the money goes.
Yeah.
Obviously, they want Frenkie de Jong as well. Likelihood is, at the moment, they can't do 2 70 to 100 million pound deals in one summer. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. So they have to get a bit creative. Now, let us know if there's any number 8s that you'd like to see, because that is on the agenda for United. I think they want a ball player, number 8. They want a striker, right back, centre back, goalkeeper are all like positions they would like to improve, but they're not the highest priorities. It's striker and central midfield. What about this one? You can read the full story here on 90min.com, which comes out on Friday. Mateo Kovacic, Rob, is... Now, everyone has seen Jorginho was sold to Arsenal, right? Chelsea fans quite divided on Jorginho, but what Chelsea have is a hell of a lot of players, and they have a policy which is relatively new to the club since they come in. This is part of the reason why Mason Mount hasn't re-signed yet. He might have been linked with Mason Mount. Mason Mount's out of contract in 2024. He wants assurances that his position in the team will be not guaranteed, but he'll have a good shot at it. Chelsea also want him to sign like a long-term 8-year, 9-year contract. And obviously, I think there's understanding that if players aren't convinced if Mason Mount isn't convinced in the project, he's probably not going to do that. It's not a 3-year deal, exactly. Mateo Kovacic is also in this boat. He's out of contract in 2024. I like him. I think he's a great player. I saw a Croatian journalist. Croatia played Wales on Saturday. A Croatian journalist has said, we think we have the best midfield 3 in the world. Modric, Brozovic, Kovacic. And it's really hard to disagree with that at an international level. Kovacic, 91 caps for Croatia. Out of contract in 2024. Chelsea made it clear that if players are not willing to commit, they will sell. And obviously, in January, we had proof that they will also sell to rivals. Now, I wouldn't put United only in this boat. Man City and Liverpool are also looking to upgrade their midfield options. And Kovacic and his representatives are weighing up their options about what they do next. So this one, a little bit out of the blue, but could become a thing in the summer. And I think from what we understand, he wants to stay in England. He would like to stay in England.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of options for him. I think this would be a hell of a purchase.
Yeah, I did a story on him when he was at Inter Milan and he was kind of next big thing, and United was sniffing around him then. And at that point, this is a long time ago now. And he obviously ended up at Real Madrid, didn't he? And bagged himself a few medals. But here he is at Chelsea, and it does feel like he is surplus to requirements. Funnily enough, I would look at him as a player who was a kind of Potter-style midfielder, like, kind of someone that can do a lot of things in midfield and has energy and can run the game from deeper positions, but is also really good in the 10 and around the box. And I think the funny thing is, we've not seen him score many goals for Chelsea over the period what is, and that's the kind of player he is. He kind of is a little bit of a Sabitzer type player in that playing in different roles. So yes, if you weren't going to sign Sabitzer and you were looking at market value, and Sabitzer was around that 10 to 15 to 20, then I would be willing to go a little bit higher for a player like Kovacic. I think that he's an incredibly accomplished player. We were debating his age earlier on because I still feel like he's 26, but he's not. He's 28, 29. So he's at that stage of his career where he's looking for maybe his not last big deal, but second to last big deal, looking for maybe a little bit of commitment. And at Chelsea, there is always this problem that because they've got 87 first team players, that why would you sign deals there where you probably won't play? You won't even get the match day squad in some
Bear in mind as well, Chelsea would also they've signed Enzo Fernandez. They also want another midfielder.
Exactly. Well, they always want another midfielder and they want another everything, don't they? Every week at Chelsea, they are the perfect example of sweet shop football. It's like you're running the sweet shop and I just want all these ones and yum, yum, yum. That's what we eat up all these sweets. So Chelsea do that. And that means that there's some very good players at Chelsea who will be surplus to requirements. It could be the case that we are talking about Mason Mount being on the market very soon and at Man United looking at a player like Mount, because again, I think his sensibility in the final third and in the midfield positions is a player that you could buy into and look at him and say, yeah, and do you know what? Maybe he'll bring his best mate with him, who's at West Ham United and scored the opening goal for England yesterday. And I think actually played really well against Italy. So, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Mount and Declan Rice. Of course, the Man United fans that hate the whole England angle would be furious at United signing Mount and Rice. That's almost as bad as Kane and Rice to a lot of Man United fans. But I like Mason Mount. I think Mason Mount is a really good footballer, and people forget he was a big part of that team that kind of pushed Chelsea on when he came back from Derby, and they won the Champions League that next year, didn't they? Mason Mount was a major part of that. I think he's a definitely European level standard midfielder. You might even be able to get him a little bit cheaper if he's running out of contracts and Chelsea want to move him on because they want to sign someone else.
Yeah, obviously, there's a lot of players in that Chelsea squad. Chelsea have they want to sign a goalkeeper, they want to sign a striker, they still like Declan Rice and other midfielders, etc., etc. So they are trying to build a team for the future. And obviously, if there are players who are I don't think they want players to run into the last 2 years of their contract. Obviously, they can't do that straight away. But long term, they do need to shrink their squad down. And that might mean that some players leave, whether that's Mason Mount, whether that's Kovacic. From what we understand, Pep, Jurgen Klopp, Erik ten Hag all like Kovacic as a professional and very, very good player.
And I actually think the best is to come with Kovacic. That's what I like about it. So, like, even when he was younger, he had this kind of, I'm going to become the next best midfielder in the world vibe, like at 21, because he just was so active and such an engine and technically so proficient. I think we moved on. I think his value kind of dipped and went up and down, when he was at Real Madrid. But I still think he's that player. I think he could come to Man United and have a huge impact, not just on the first team squad, Scott, but be a player that you could bring in out and do different roles, and he could do them all very well. He would certainly, for me, be a massive, massive upgrade on McTominay and Fred. Massive upgrade in terms of your consistency. And I think he'd quite like it at Man United. He's played for a team like Real Madrid, who are a traditional, top 5 club in the world. Man United are one of those. Unfortunately, Chelsea are not. And I think sitting on Chelsea's bench is not something he will want to do in the months and years ahead.
Was wearing the captain's armband for Chelsea the other day against Everton.
Yes.
So that's not to say that he won't extend with Chelsea.
No.
But there are players who Chelsea have some business to take care of. They signed so many players. They've signed so many players earlier this year and earlier this season that they have to trim that squad down.
Yeah.
And they have a policy where they want to make the team younger. Kovacic is obviously 28, 29 years old, 29 in May. And while optimally, I suppose United would like to sign a 22, 23-year-old player they can keep for 10 years. If you're in the position where you don't have 500 million to spend every summer or 300 million to spend every summer, you have to be savvy and you have to be smart. You've seen that with Erik ten Hag. He's perfectly willing to play that game. And Kovacic, with a year left of his contract, isn't going to come too expensive.
It's not going to come too expensive. And I think you've always got this kind of short, mid and long-term view of transfers and how you build. And I do think Man United, there's this growing vibe there within the camp and certainly within the managerial structure at United, that they've got these little diamonds in the rough in the youth teams and they're looking at them. And I think Kobe Manu is a really, really exciting prospect who's on the cusp of kind of making the jump in the way that Garnacho was, say, 6 to 12 months ago. Now, that changes everything in terms of your midfield structure because it means that you might let Manu take the McTominay minutes, say, in the next 12 months, and you build that way. Now, that might mean that you look at a Mason Mount and go, nah, not for us. That's not where we're going. But you might actually look at a Kovacic at 29 and go, immediate quality, you bring him in. He's an international player. He's got loads of experience. He's a winner. He also knows some of your Real Madrid bods at your own football club, Casemiro and Varane, etc., etc. And these things then kind of work. And I do think that he is very much a Ten Hag type player. I think he would come in and thrive at Man United. It's just, again, that Man United fans wouldn't get that excited about him. Like, he's not a Frenkie de Jong level excitement kind of capture, would he be? And I think a lot of people would be like, oh, Chelsea cast off. No, Chelsea need to get rid of people because the way they structure their football club is just kind of bizarre at the moment. But Chelsea are giving these big contracts out to younger players, building for the future. But you can look too far in the future sometimes, Scott. Like, what you're building for, 8 years' time? Like, you need to still win today and tomorrow. And I think that's where Man United are. Certainly after this year, where we've had, let's not put the mockers on it, but a successful season so far, is that if you take that into the summer, the likes of Kovacic could certainly make your squad more competitive if you're in the Champions League the following year.
Unless Chelsea win the Champions League, they are not going to be, as it stands. Anyway, Harry Kane, back to it. Suggestions earlier this week, Rob. I joked about this. Offer Dean Henderson in exchange. And then, obviously, a week or two later, it's reported as Tottenham, like Dean Henderson. We knew this already.
Yeah.
We knew this already. Like, Tottenham were looking at Dean Henderson last year, I want to say.
And before.
They need a long-term replacement for Hugo Lloris, who is injured at the moment. Hugo Lloris is making more mistakes. Dean Henderson wants first-team football. I doubt whether he's good enough for a team the status of Spurs. I have questions over, but definitely he will be one of those goalkeepers in the conversation to get a move if United do decide to sell him, which I'm pretty sure they end up doing.
They'll sell Dean Henderson, absolutely. Spurs' interest goes all the way back to when he was at Sheffield United and he was a hot property, and then we're talking about maybe a valuation at the time of 50 million. And that was before he's not on the crazy contract that he's already on at Man United, even though he doesn't play for us anymore. So, one of the top 20 goalkeepers in the world in terms of wages. You're saying about, is he good enough? I think it's more of a case of what, again, your squad build looks like. Do Spurs want to move on from Lloris, or do they want a soft transition of power where Lloris stays at the club, maybe signs an extension, and that you have these two goalkeepers? I still do think that lots of clubs think like that, even though I think the popular narrative is that you need a bona fide number one. And I think someone like Henderson, maybe after his year at Nottingham Forest, like depending on what happens at Forest, and kind of he knows he's not coming back to Man United, I think that is going to be nailed on. Is that if he gets his move, he obviously wants the biggest club possible, doesn't he? And he wants his England place. So Spurs, I think, is a really good fit for him. Spurs have scouted him for seasons. Like, this is not a new thing. And if you are going to buy Harry Kane, and it is going to cost you 90 to 100 million, if you've got a goalkeeper worth maybe in the 20, 30 million pound bracket, because I think that is a fair value for a player like Henderson.
Especially with the contract that he's got.
Absolutely. And that needs to be addressed, because I don't know if any club will pay what United gave him. Like, that was an incredible contract that he got. And I get why he signed it, because it did look like he would be David De Gea's successor. Like, at that point, that's why he signed the deal. And that's why he wanted to stay. That's also why he got browned off and was not happy with things. But I think if he's going to Tottenham Hotspur, he would still get a very strong contract from them. And they'd have to find a way to give him a route to their first team. Is he good enough? I don't know. And I don't really care about that. But I do think that Spurs do look at him as a viable alternative to bring to their squad and improve it at goalkeeper. And I think that Man United themselves will be looking at goalkeeping alternatives, just maybe not in that marketplace of a Henderson, because I think they do need someone who's going to keep De Gea on his toes or give something different that De Gea does. And at the moment, we simply do not have that in our own ranks.
Yes, indeed. We'll see what ends up happening. United have got to get smart, though. They've got to look at the players that they want to sell. Hey, we got this little bit of bait. Might not always work with Daniel Levy, but
and towards a Kane deal, like that's the thing. Like, what turns
even Napoli, even maybe Napoli.
Henderson to Napoli would be a very good and interesting deal, wouldn't it? I think that could happen. That's not. I think now actually English players have got more value on the continent than they've ever had before, because of the success they've had from the kind of Sancho mold onwards. And we're seeing these young players do really well on the continent that probably wouldn't walk into any first team in the Premier League. And you're kind of going, oh, look at them. They're struggled in England or at the highest level in England. And here they are now, youngsters going and doing it somewhere else. And Dean Henderson's not a youngster, but you could absolutely see him going to a Napoli and being very good, or being a top goalkeeper in Italy. I think that would work very well for him. But I think we talk about Harry Kane. Is that United need to look at what would turn Tottenham on most? I think cash would turn Tottenham on most. That's why they've put out this £100 million price tag, which, as we said, is a change of position from only a few weeks ago, where they went, nope, he can see his deal out and we are not going to sell, to now, well, 100 million might make us sell. I think that's probably more the route it will go, because I think Daniel Levy would want that 100 million to invest and to give to his new coach, who he might well be employing in the next week or two.
Yes, let's run into the comments from the last show. We had plenty. I think the Beatty title might have worked a little bit. Why Harry Kane would be a better fit than Osimhen for Man United. Let's look at it. We were getting accusations of not ever watching Osimhen play. Just look at the strikers that have been top scorers in Serie A over the last 15 years. And tell me how many of them. I saw Stretford Paddock do this on TikTok. And yes, I do use TikTok. Look at the strikers in top scorers in Serie A over the last 10, 15 years, and tell me how many of those would make it in the Premier League. It ain't many. Anyway,
I've seen Osimhen play at least 7 times. No, I'm joking. Like I've seen Osimhen play a lot, and I think the thing is, we're not knocking Victor Osimhen. Like, I know you're saying there about
this is the thing, right? Yeah,
you
I
can
would also take Victor Osimhen. Let's make it clear.
Of course, you
Absolutely.
take Victor Osimhen. Like, he's amazing, and it's so boring that we have to put those caveats. But we get challenged on these things all the time, don't we, in the media, and certainly on Twitter, where people maybe don't even watch the show and just read the title or something or along the lines. That's how it goes. It's more about what Man United can get and suitability. I think Victor Osimhen could become absolute the same level as Haaland in terms of what you expect every season, which is like 50 goals a year. You can expect that from certain kinds of players, and say, well, they've only scored 48 this year. What's the problem with that? They're not doing what you want them to do. I think Man United's build is a little bit more intricate than that, and that's not saying we would not take Osimhen. If you took Osimhen, Scott, it would mean that you'd have to change a lot of other things as well. Now, I'm not against that because I don't think United are perfect, but I don't think bringing in a kind of primary number 9, alpha male is exactly what you need at the moment. You need someone that helps the rest of the team to do stuff. And that's why Kane is such an interesting prospect. Let's talk about Kane getting the record for England, because I have read already today where people going, but 17 penalties, so it doesn't count, Like, do you watch football? Do you actually watch Harry Kane? Or do you just want to kind of bleat about things? Harry Kane is an elite operator at the top end of the pitch. I think the only thing that goes against him, Scott, is that, yes, once upon a time he had a bad injury record, and you hope that doesn't manifest itself again. But he is exactly the kind of player that United need in this moment when you're looking at upgrading immediately. And I think 100 million still, I'm going to stick by the whole spiel that is value. Would you say that's value at 100 million?
I nodded, just for the people who are listening on audio. Just looking at some other comments. Classic British bias on display here. If Kane is this leader, when the wire Spurs in this situation where their leaders nor their management have any accountability and ambition. Also consider if Harry Kane wasn't Harry Kane, would Spurs be in the top 4?
No.
Ask yourself that question as well. Because Harry Kane is one of 11 players in that team.
Yeah.
And he's playing well above. He's the one taking Spurs up levels from where they were. Just because he can't win trophies with Spurs, it's not a reflection on him. It's a reflection on Spurs.
Yeah, look, our show is about Man United, isn't it? And I think people think that we just operate in Manchester United circles. We don't. We operate in Premier League and European circles. We do all this work across the board. We look at all these talents. We compare them, contrast. We look at all the information that we can get. And I think when you look at Harry Kane, it's not because he's English, and there isn't an English bias towards anything we're saying. It really isn't. I don't think being English makes you better. Like, that's a crazy notion, isn't it? And if anything, we do our shows and we always constantly say that we don't care about England or nationalities. I think it's more
Welsh,
about fit.
Everyone.
You're Welsh, exactly. What part of England is that then? South Wales or wherever. It's like it's not London, though that's where you're actually sat right now. So you obviously have an English bias, Scott. Anyway, but I look at this and it was about needs must. And I think when you look at Harry Kane, it's when you look at the goals he scored, I look more at the profile of the type of goals he scores. And that's what excites me about him. It's that he scores goals in different ways every week. He's not a tapping artist, but it's getting Harry Kane 6 yards out. Harry Kane is going to score. He is. The great thing about Kane is that I like his work in the 10. When he drops into the 10, he's so proficient. And you even saw in that England game last night against Italy, is that his peeling off into the channel and the production he gives you there is not a normal for a number 9 of that level. Like an Osimhen cannot give you that. That doesn't mean Osimhen isn't a world-class striker. It really doesn't mean that. It just means you're looking at skill sets. So I think that's what Ten Hag is looking for, is that someone who can add those skill sets. And the other big side that Scott, I'm going to say every week, is leadership. He is a leader for England. And the reason why he's got that goal-scoring record is because he puts his neck on the block. He's put his neck on the block for Tottenham for years. He's one of our own. So I think when you look at it, I think he could come to Man United, and I think for 2, 3, 4 year period, he could give you incredible production, both goals and assists, but also leadership. And that takes United from a club from teetering around 3rd and 4th, who might be 5th and 6th next year. That puts you up there in the title conversation.
I'm running out of time. I need to scoot, but one more name from Mehar. Talks about Palhinha from Fulham, but
yes, please.
A name that we haven't discussed in the striker sense is Randall Kolo Muani. As Mehal says, this lad looks the real deal. 2-footed, strong, can header, has good feet, can play anywhere in the front three. And had Martinez not saved his shot in the World Cup final, he would be a household name. If we do get a takeover, I believe we'll be in for this lad. And could it be the end for Sancho and Martial? Thoughts?
Potential, yeah. Like again, I think we will be discussing more about the futures of Sancho and Martial, depending on how the next few weeks go. And I think are really important weeks for those two players, because as much as I believe in them, and I do, we've talked a lot about Sancho and we've talked about Martial's quality. It is no good if these players are on big wages and can't help you either because of fitness and form. You have to find a way, either away from them with new signings and be real and lose them out the football club, or you give it another shot, don't you? And then risk that your own build stagnates. So, yes, let's wait and see. And I think that's down to Erik ten Hag to decide about how useful a player is to him. But there could be some names that we've not talked about yet who are at Man United in the summer.
We will discuss on future shows. I'm going to wrap up from here. You can subscribe to our show wherever you get your pods. Watch us on YouTube twice a week as well. Tuesdays and Fridays we usually record. Head over to the channel if you're listening on audio. Subscribe, like, and join the community. You can watch us on video if you would like to, but also we have audio for you on all of those major podcast platforms. Get in touch with us through the comments on YouTube, and also get in touch with us on Twitter about anything we've discussed today. Let us know who your preferred number 8 alternative to Frenkie de Jong might be. @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseSandMU for the show as well. Rob, thanks so much. We'll see you next Tuesday for another Promised Land Manchester United podcast.